Before we dive into this story, take a second to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Because stories like this don't just end, they haunt you long after the screen goes dark. The call came in just after dawn, a quiet suburban home in South Florida. No signs of forced entry, no neighbors reporting gunshots. Inside, first responders found 26-year-old Donovan Metayer alone, motionless, the room heavy with silence and something far darker. By the time police confirmed his identity, a chilling detail surfaced almost immediately. Donovan wasn't just another name on a report. He was a survivor of the Parkland school shooting. 7 years earlier, he had walked out of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School alive, while 17 others never did. Now, he was gone. Detectives secured the scene quickly, but the atmosphere felt different from the start. There was no chaos, no frantic search for a suspect. Instead, there was a question hanging in the air that no one wanted to say out loud. How does someone survive one of the deadliest school shootings in American history, only to lose the war years later? As investigators combed through the house, they noticed something unsettling. The space was meticulously organized, no signs of struggle, no broken objects. On a desk nearby sat personal documents, medical paperwork, and a folded note that officers wouldn't immediately describe. One detective reportedly muttered, "This wasn't impulsive." That single sentence shifted the entire tone of the case. Donovan Metayer had lived with the aftermath of Parkland every day since February 14, 2018. Friends described him as intelligent, soft-spoken, and deeply reflective, but police files told a more troubling story. Multiple hospitalizations, mental health holds, and a history of internal battles that never made headlines. The trauma didn't fade with time, it mutated. Investigators soon learned that just days before his death, Donovan had legally purchased a firearm. The timing raised red flags. Why now? What changed? And who, if anyone, knew what he was planning? As news broke, the internet reacted fast. Some called it inevitable. Others called it a failure of the system. But detectives weren't satisfied with assumptions. They began tracing Donovan's final weeks, his phone records, therapy appointments, text messages, and financial activity. What they found painted a picture far more complex than a single tragic decision. There were missed calls that went unanswered, messages sent late at night, heavy with emotion but vague in meaning. One text sent just 48 hours before his death stood out. "I don't think they ever left that building with me." Who was they? The victims? The memories? Or something else entirely? Then came the discovery that changed everything. While reviewing court records, investigators uncovered that a civil protection order restricting Donovan's access to firearms had recently expired. The order had been in place due to prior mental health crises. Its expiration was quiet, procedural, almost invisible. Yet its timing aligned perfectly with the purchase that ended his life. And buried deep within his medical files was a final evaluation, one that warned of escalating risk if certain safeguards were removed. The question now wasn't just why Donovan died. It was whether this tragedy had been slowly set in motion long before that morning, and if it could have been stopped. But when investigators opened the contents of Donovan Metayer's digital cloud account, they realized this case was far from over, and what they found inside would force everyone to confront an uncomfortable truth about survival, trauma, and the cost of looking okay on the outside. The contents of Donovan Metayer's digital cloud account pulled investigators deeper into a psychological maze they hadn't anticipated. What initially looked like a personal archive, photos, notes, medical documents, slowly revealed something far troubling. There were voice memos recorded late at night, Donovan's voice calm but strained, speaking as if someone were listening. He talked about guilt, about walking past ghosts, about hearing silence that felt louder than screams. These weren't goodbye messages, they were confessions made to no one and everyone. Detectives flagged one folder labeled simply "After." Inside were timelines, dates circled in red, and references to events that lined up with key moments after the Parkland shooting. Therapy sessions, court hearings, medication changes. One file stood out, a scanned psychological assessment warning that removing protective restrictions could lead to catastrophic self-harm. The assessment was dated months before the protection order expired.
Someone had read this. Someone had signed off anyway. As police worked backward through Donovan's final weeks, they noticed something else. His therapy appointments had abruptly stopped. The clinic cited scheduling issues. His last prescription refill had been delayed. Friends said he'd been unusually quiet, but insisted he was doing better. That phrase kept appearing in interviews, doing better, like a reflex people use to comfort themselves. Then a problem surfaced. Several key files from Donovan's cloud account vanished overnight. Cybercrime units confirmed the files had been accessed remotely after his death. Someone had logged in using valid credentials, not a hacker, not random, someone who knew exactly where to look. The missing files included drafts of unsent letters, detailed reflections on accountability, and a document titled, "What Failed Me?" Suddenly, this wasn't just a tragedy, it was a breach. Detectives began questioning those closest to Donovan during his final months: healthcare administrators, legal advocates, even a former case manager who had recently changed jobs. No one admitted accessing the account. Everyone denied knowledge. But tension grew as investigators realized the truth might implicate institutions meant to protect him. Then came another disturbing development. One of Donovan's closest friends, someone he had confided in repeatedly, reported being followed. The incidents were subtle at first: a car idling outside her apartment, anonymous calls with no one on the line. She told police she felt watched after agreeing to hand over Donovan's text messages. Investigators couldn't confirm a direct threat, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, media pressure exploded. Headlines reduced Donovan's life to a single word: suicide. But inside the case file, detectives saw something else: a slow unraveling accelerated by systemic neglect. Emails revealed concerns raised, then dismissed, warnings issued, then archived. Every missed step added weight to the question no one wanted to answer. Was Donovan abandoned long before he died? As investigators reconstructed his final day, a final anomaly emerged. Donovan had scheduled a meeting, one that never happened. The calendar entry had been deleted, but metadata recovered the title: Final Review. Final review of what? Late that night, detectives received confirmation that one of the missing cloud files had been partially recovered. It was an audio recording, corrupted but salvageable. In it, Donovan's voice was steady, deliberate. If you're hearing this, then someone decided this was acceptable. The recording cut out mid-sentence. And as investigators prepared to trace who had accessed that file and why, one thing became clear: Donovan Metayer's death wasn't just about what he survived, it was about what the system allowed to happen next. The recovered audio file became the centerpiece of the investigation. Digital forensics traced the last access point to a secured network tied to a third-party administrative contractor, an entity buried so deep in the system that even seasoned detectives needed days to untangle its role. This wasn't a villain in a dark alley. It was paperwork, protocols, and quiet decisions made behind closed doors. When subpoenas finally forced cooperation, the truth emerged in fragments. Donovan's protection order hadn't simply expired unnoticed. It had been flagged for review. An internal recommendation suggested extending safeguards due to ongoing risk indicators, but the recommendation stalled. A staffing shortage, a backlog, a missed follow-up. No single dramatic failure,
just a chain of small ones that aligned at the worst possible moment. Investigators confronted administrators with the recovered audio. Faces went pale as Donovan's words echoed through sterile conference rooms. Someone decided this was acceptable. No one spoke, because in that moment, it was clear the recording wasn't an accusation, it was a verdict. The missing cloud files were eventually accounted for. They had been accessed by a legal consultant attempting to prepare for potential liability. The files were deemed sensitive, then quietly removed, not to protect Donovan, but to protect institutions. That act alone didn't cause his death, but it changed the story forever. It transformed a private tragedy into a public reckoning. As the case closed, there were no arrests, no courtroom showdown, no handcuffs. Instead, there were policy reviews, resignations, and statements carefully worded to avoid blame. Donovan's family received apologies, but apologies don't rewind time. At a small memorial, friends spoke about who Donovan was before Parkland, the laugh he tried to hide, the way he remembered birthdays, the future he kept planning for, even when the past refused to let go. One speaker said something that lingered longer than the rest. Surviving doesn't always mean escaping. The final investigative report ended with a rare sentence, one not often seen in official documents. It read, "This outcome was preventable." For viewers, for the public, for anyone who followed the case, that sentence landed like a punch to the chest, because it forced a question far more unsettling than who was responsible. How many others are still out there carrying unimaginable sorrow in silence, being told they're fine because they're functioning? Donovan Metayer survived one of America's darkest days. He endured years of invisible wounds, and when the systems designed to protect him finally looked away, the cost was irreversible. They closed the file, but the story didn't end, because somewhere right now, another survivor is being told to wait, another warning is being archived, another safeguard is quietly expiring. And if this story shook you, if it made you think twice about what survival really means, then stay with this channel. Subscribe, because the next story isn't easier to hear, but it's one you can't afford to miss.